Hey guys, today I'm here with Duskin Basker Brown, who has a couple of books, and we're going to talk about alcohol, which is what your books are about, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they stray into other subjects. I think I don't really help people to stop drinking. I help them to start living. So, yeah, like we tend to get into quite a lot of broader issues. And if you want to go there, then it might be fun too.
Yeah, that aligns perfectly with a lot of the work that I do because we're told through these cultural I don't know, like dieting is always an easy one that people understand. It's a good analogy. We're taught to stop doing so many things. And that's really not the way humans' minds work or how our habits work. We can't stop doing something that it's hard. It's stressful. It usually causes more problems than it solves. So instead, what we should do is try to crowd out the things that we want to stop doing with the things that we want to do. Because we were talking before we got on here about how we always think we have more time than what we actually do. And if you fill up all of that time, all of those time slots with purposeful, intentional things that you want, then naturally the things that you don't want fall away because you don't have time to get to them.
Yeah, yeah, no, I absolutely. I mean, I think there is this prevailing idea that stopping smoking or stopping drinking is difficult, and I think that's based on most people's experience of it. But most people go about it in the wrong way. They approach it from the wrong direction. They start with the action. And for my money, that's totally the wrong place to start. I think if you start with the beliefs, if you start to work on why you drink, what is it that sits underneath that? What do you believe it is doing for you? Because if you didn't believe it was doing something for you, you wouldn't be doing it, right?
Mhm.
So if you get to grips with those first and then do a little bit of work around thought management, some people call them cravings, but end of the day, cravings are just thoughts. If you end up, working ways around the thinking of it, then the actions follow, and the actions then become the easy bit. But of course, everybody does it in the wrong direction, don't they? They think, right, I'll get to grips with the actions, and I hope that the thoughts and the beliefs catch up, but they rarely do.
Absolutely. And that's the inner work that is at the basis of doing anything that you want to in this world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the work that I do with people is on one level. And sometimes we discover other work that needs to be done on a much deeper level because everybody has trauma in their life. I mean, it's just like the only way to not have hard, difficult things happen to you is to not be alive because like like you can't be a human being without having a mother and a father, which is all manner of trouble because even if they're actually quite nice to you, at some point they're going to die and leave you in the lurch, and that's not going to help, is it? So there's no way that you can actually exist without having traumatic events happen to you. And some people are they're lucky because they grow up in a very nurturing and caring attached environment, and they're much better able to handle those events and they take them in their stride. But most of us, we don't have perfect kind of environment, and certain things are difficult for us and certain things we struggle with, and we learn when we're quite young that we can't deal with these things, so we develop these coping mechanisms like alcohol and food and tobacco, and probably a fair few of them are digital these days around social media or games or compulsive shopping or whatever. And that pattern gets set, and at some point we're going to have to kind of get to grips with that if we want to be the kind of people that we actually want to be, that we deserve to be. You could even go as far as to say that we were born to be.
Sure. We are all addicted to something, and those addictions are wide and come in a lot of forms and fashions. And alcohol is one of those that get it's a louder type of addiction, kind of like drugs, the harder drugs in particular. But shopping is just as bad of an addiction as gambling, as food. Food is something really interesting because it is probably just as detrimental if you're not, the standard the standard diet for most people is a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugar, a lot of things. And but next to nobody sees that as a bad addiction. Not at the forefront of our minds anyway. But yeah, we're all just self-medicating some way or another, aren't we?
Yeah,
Exercise.
absolutely. And I think most people aren't really ready to acknowledge that alcohol causes problems. They sort of part of them knows that it does, and they'll acknowledge that it causes problems to people who live on the street and drink, cheap alcohol out of a carrier bag. But, they're not really prepared to kind of actually acknowledge that it might be causing problems to them or to the people that they know. It's something that's kind of remote in the same way that most people, they're quite happy to believe that drugs are a problem. But again, it's quite a remote thing. It's not the kind of people that I know. The kind of people that I know, they only take prescription medication and smoke cigarettes and drink a lot of coffee, which of course, they're all drugs, aren't they? So I think it is more widely understood that there are harms to it, but most people aren't prepared to really think about it and really get to grips with it. And culturally, I don't think the narrative is there. We don't talk about alcohol in terms of its harms. We talk about it generally in this kind of light-hearted way. Oh, like, of course you're difficult. Well, have a glass of wine. Life's tough. You deserve it. And that's the way we talk about it. So even those areas, I don't think the narrative is really there. I mean, food. Yeah, good luck with that. I think we've got even more work to do, haven't we?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's a beautifully ironic. We did not plan on recording this episode on St. Patrick's Day, but here we are, which is a holiday that is renowned for its drinking and partying and having a good time and whatnot. I will say it definitely depends on where you're located in the world because in the section of the United States where I live, alcohol just is across the board very frowned upon, even if it is just once in a while. You have one beer once a week and automatically everybody thinks you're drunk and whatnot. So it definitely depends on where you're located for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the really interesting things about it. I've spent a lot of time studying and talking to people, and quite frankly, staring into space, thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I guess about 20 years ago, what was predominant in the field was this idea of drug effects and the dopamine theory of addiction and things like that. And it was all the drugs. The drugs had this effect, and you give them to people, and they just like crack being the absolute epitome of that. Anybody goes anywhere near some crack, they're going to instantly become addicted to it. But to be honest with you, that is not the case. The majority of people that use crack cocaine use it recreationally for a bit and then don't develop a substance misuse disorder with it. I mean, that is not me advocating the use of crack cocaine, by the way.
Sure.
It's just the fact is that there are people out there who smoke crack cocaine and do it maybe half a dozen times and never do it again. So it's not totally the drug, but I think we've gone too far in the other direction. And now everybody talks about trauma and how trauma is the thing that underpins drug use. All drug addicts have got trauma. But again, that doesn't actually stand up to scrutiny. And if you look at the research, particularly some of the research we've done into the reasons why people drink alcohol. So we asked a lot of people who'd got sober, why were they drinking? And about well, there were three groups essentially. One of them, there was a lot of childhood trauma, and that doesn't surprise very much. Another group had traumatic events in their adult life, so they probably weren't drinking at an unusual level before that happened, and that was what triggered the increase in their drinking. And then you get another group of people who don't appear to have any kind of underlying serious unprocessed trauma. They might have a bit of social anxiety. They might wonder about where they fit in. They might actually just, be in a group of people who a lot of them drank for whatever reasons, or they might have gone into an industry. So there's a lot of drinking in the armed forces, for example. There's a lot of drinking in the financial sector. If you end up in those situations, you end up becoming repeatedly exposed to it, and repeat exposure is something that causes a problem. And I think that kind of gets very much down to your point, that uh, I've spoken to a lot of people from America, and some of them say, where we live, it's not like alcohol is part of the culture. Alcohol is the culture.
Hmm.
So it's not enough to just say, well, I grew up in America, therefore, obviously, it
Oh, no.
depends because there are lots of different communities, and each different community has got a different attitude towards alcohol. And I think that's understanding that broader picture that yes, do you know what? It's got a lot to do with, the family that you grew up in. It's got a lot to do with the community you grew up in. It's got a lot to do with the society that you grew up in. And actually, many of the problems that our society sees are now transnational because most of the companies that sell alcohol and all of the companies that sell tobacco and all of the companies that sell food are now huge transnational entities, aren't they? So it's actually got as much to do with global regulation as it has with country regulation. Then, just for fun, you can chuck in genetics, and of course, the drug effect is real. Drugs are addictive. That's one of the things about it. So it's this kind of like constellation of effects, and sometimes I think we look down on people for their behavior, and we say we'd never do that, and it's like, well, yeah, but if you were them, you would do that because they are a victim of this constellation of effects.
Sure. And we think that people should just do better, but it's so complicated in that. And man, we could really dissect this for a while. I have a cousin who we recently lost to addiction. He died a year ago in January, so it's been very recent-ish. And
Mm.
he fell into the category of just, yeah, I guess it was just the culture that he fell into. And even though we grew up in the same area, the culture in which I was exposed to was very different to the culture in which he was exposed to. So, and our family always compared us because we were the same age, and they were like, "Oh, I'm so glad that you made the right decisions and you did good, and I hate that he didn't, and why couldn't have he just like you?" And the truth of the matter is that had we continued to be close into our teen, because we were very close as children, but then when we became teenagers, he went his way and I went my way. And had that not occurred, it's a very high likely chance that I would have ended up just like he was.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we really misunderestimate about the places that we live in. We spend a lot of time with the people that we spend a lot of time with, and the people that we spend a lot of time with tend to be like us, and they tend to have similar experience. So, if you've got a reasonably well-paying job and a college education, most of the people that you spend your time with will have reasonably well-paying jobs and college educations, and they will be very similar to you. But you will not need to go more than about half a mile from where you live, and you will be able to meet people who have a drastically different set of life experiences to you, who have badly paying jobs if they're lucky and have very little education. And of course, the outcomes for them are going to be very different. And you can kind of almost see, like, well, we grew up in the same community, but it's a very different expression of that same community, isn't it?
Hmm. Yeah, it blows my mind every day how readily available that alcohol is in comparison to other demonized substances that don't cause as much damage just across the board.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, look, I don't want to minimize the harm caused by opioids or oxy or anything like that because
No,
I've met enough people whose lives have been ruined, families are ruined,
I
hope
was
is
thinking more
lost.
along the lines of like cannabis.
Yeah, yeah. So we can talk about cannabis in a second because I think that's quite an interesting one. But I mean, the thing is, a lot of people are quite comfortable using the phrase opioid epidemic in America, and that's a phrase that you hear all of the time. But if you look at the CDC statistics on the subject, opioids kill about half the amount of people, actually slightly less than half the amount of people that alcohol kills. Yeah, nobody's talking about an alcohol epidemic, and
Mhm.
as you say, it is so incredibly available. I'm obviously I've never tried to buy alcohol where you live, but I'm going to assume that it's kind of similar to the availability in the UK, which, like, honestly, there's about 25 places within a couple of hundred meters of where I live that you can buy alcohol, and it's just
Mhm.
it's just so over provided. and actually it's cheap. I know everybody's thinking a lot about the cost of living, and they're always telling you that the prices are going up. But actually, the way alcohol is taxed, and I know that varies from state to state in the US, but certainly the way it's taxed in the UK, it's taxed as an amount on. Like a barrel of beer, you pay $20 on the entire barrel, and it's been that way for years. So the barrel of beer is getting more and more expensive, but you're still paying $20 of tax on it. So actually, the amount of tax on it in real terms is going down. And that's why alcohol is about 75% cheaper than it was 30 years ago in real terms. So availability and cost is a huge issue.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, marijuana, that's an interesting one. I think if you look at the statistics on addiction to marijuana, it compares quite well with alcohol. Alcohol, about 20% of the people that try it will end up having some sort of substance use disorder. Marijuana, it's more like 9%. So it's a lot less addictive as a substance. So yeah, I mean, I think you could make a strong case for making alcohol illegal and marijuana completely legal. It's not without its problems, and particularly if you're smoking the very strong stuff, you've got to be a little bit careful, and you've got to be very careful about it if you're anything under about the age of 25, because any of these kind of drugs, these intoxicants, are more of an effect on a developing brain. So you know. Under the age of 25, you do need to be very, very careful with it, which is the unfortunate. That's when most people smoke it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, they do generally get to it when they're teenagers or children even. I think I was probably 12 when it was first introduced to me, which is insane because I have a 10-year-old and what?
Yeah, 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 and I mean that's one of those things that I mean my daughter's 8, so I kind of like starting to worry about that sort of stuff myself. And you know what? I'd love to live in a world where it just wasn't a problem, but we don't live in a world like that, do we? So you can't prepare the path for the child. You can only prepare the child for the path. And I think being honest and talking about it, and saying giving them some of the information about what the consequences of it can be. I think that's the way to progress. But you really do have to have a strong relationship with your kids, and of course, those teenage years, that is when that relationship gets most tested.
Yeah, that's why I've always said that you should do a lot of the forefront work before they get to teenagers. People are always my ever since I had children, and anybody who has children has heard it 1,000 times, like, oh, just wait until the teenage years. Oh, just wait. And I've always, because I can think ahead like that, have put a lot of time and energy into cultivating the relationship I have with them as children because that's when the work that's when it matters the most. By the time they hit teenage years, there's not a whole lot that you can do really. You can guide them a little bit, but they're becoming an adult. They're becoming their independent person of you. And so you really got to do all of the forefront work so that when they do come to the teenage years, they feel comfortable being honest with you about what's going on in their lives. They become comfortable, respect you enough to ask your advice on things and really take it into consideration and all of that. But, time will tell. None of us can predict the future and how things are going to land.
Yeah, but I think you're absolutely right about the whole trust and the relationship thing, because absolutely they are going to get their advice from someone.
Somewhere.
And if you haven't done the work to kind of maintain that relationship, then they are going to get the advice from their friends.
Mm.
And I was one of those friends, so I know how bad that advice is going to be. You got to I'm a big fan of Gabor Mate, of course, because like that's a legal obligation these days. But the book that he co-wrote, "Keep Your Kids Close," is amazing. I'm a huge fan of that. That's been very influential on me. But I think there is another quite interesting part around the relationship that adults have with certain things like alcohol. Because if you don't have a good relationship with alcohol, you are going to struggle trying to help your children have a good relationship with alcohol. Because at the end of the day, you can't give your children something you don't have. I know this because my daughter is always asking for a unicorn, and I'm not able to give her one. So some of the time, I think the most important thing we can do as parents is make sure that our relationships with intoxicants are actually as good as they can be, because otherwise you just end up you know, it always puts me in mind of the Beastie Boys. They were very, very dialed in on the hip hop of adults who would tell them not to smoke while smoking 2 packs a day. And absolutely. So you've got to you've got to maintain the relationship, but you've got to also work on your own relationships as well.
Yeah, that do as I say, not as I do mindset does not work. They're going to hear you. They hear you. They don't care because they see you. And seeing you is going to have a lot bigger effect than hearing you ever will.
Yeah. I think the only piece of childcare advice that I've ever heard that is of any value at all that ever rings true is that your kids will ignore everything you say and copy everything you do.
Absolutely. And yes, yes, I agree completely. And that's why you have to model the best behavior in all of the things. And I'm not into, I don't know how this became an episode about parenting, but I love it. Uh, I'm not into hiding things from my children, sheltering them, protecting them. I was accidentally sheltered and wound up in my 20s like completely shocked at the world and what was in it and how to navigate it and all of that. And it did me a whole lot of more harm than it did good. So I have never hid anything from my children. Now, of course, there's age appropriate things. I'm not saying just find a dramatic, far reaching terrible thing you don't want to tell your 5-year-old, that's fine. But as it becomes age appropriate, instead of shooing them away or making up some kind of story or lying, you just be honest with them. And emotions is another thing. People think that you shouldn't fight in front of your kids and you shouldn't cry in front of your kids and all of that. And I don't think that that's true either, because modeling the behavior of it's okay to get angry sometimes. The way you go about it from there, though, is, healthy anger management versus toxic anger management, or, emotions. It's safe to have emotions. So many of us don't have any idea how to regulate our own emotions in a healthy way because we never saw anyone model emotions in a healthy way. It was all done behind closed doors and in private. And when it did happen in front of you, it was not regulated because it was not intended to happen in front of you. So it's all very explosive and traumatizing for all involved if you're a child witnessing this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we shouldn't pretend emotions don't exist. 'Cause they clearly do, don't they? And I mean, I do a lot of work with men, and a lot of what we end up banging up against is basically they spend their whole lives trying to repress their emotions because they were always told men are not allowed to be emotional. We have to be strong. That means we do not ever get sad or unhappy or definitely don't cry. I mean, that would be the end of the world, wouldn't it? And that's something that we hear from caregivers. It's something that we hear from teachers sometimes. It's also not all women, but there are women out there who will sort of pay lip service to the idea that they want a man who's comfortable with his emotions, but their actions will often be a little bit different to that. So we hear it all of the time. Suppress your emotions, suppress your emotions. And the way that a lot of men cope with that is by drinking them away, because that's the one of the great things about alcohol is that it's a top-notch anesthetic and
Mhm.
it anesthetizes feelings, which is kind of good if you just want to feel absolutely nothing at all.
Mhm.
But you try and drink away the bad ones, and you end up drinking away the good ones as well. And that is one of the reasons why so many people end up just plain miserable. when they're drinking, even what a lot of people would consider moderate levels. They end up just becoming miserable because the way the brain reacts to large amounts of alcohol is to just downregulate everything, turn down all the emotions, and you know that it's great. You don't have to feel the difficult ones, but life is very, very, very boring if you don't have the good ones to go with them.
Sure. Going off of that, alcohol being an anesthetic, are you familiar with how people with autism are more likely to become alcoholics?
So, not specifically around autism. There's an awful lot of stuff at the moment around ADHD.
Mhm.
I seem to be meeting a lot of people who have a adult diagnosis of ADHD. I'm not aware of the statistics, but there are things like autism do tend to make you more susceptible. So certain mental health issues are very clearly linked with alcohol problems. PTSD and depression being two of the better understood ones, but ADHD as well. That makes you more likely to develop problems with alcohol.
Absolutely. Yeah, ADHD and autism kind of go hand in hand. They're very similar in a lot of ways. And the biggest issue with them is that everything, your senses, your thoughts, everything you feel, hear, taste, touch, everything is just on 100% of the time and nothing helps. So like with ADHD, you can get meds that calm you down and slow everything down and make it a little bit easier to process, but they're very similar to antidepressant meds and they come with a lot of issues. Not all of them. I don't know. I haven't done thorough research on every single one of them, but I have I've taken I've been on antidepressants before. And so with that, I can kind of like compare on my own, um, doing little to no research, how those work. And it just kind of dulls you back a little bit. But for autism, there's nothing you can really do about it. There is no medication that can calm it, but alcohol can.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the real dangers about alcohol is that it slips in through the gaps. It does an awful lot of things for an awful lot of different people, and that's one of the reasons why it's very seductive. And people often sort of say, "Oh, well, yes, of course, I've got a problem drinking, Duncan. I've got an addictive personality," and I sort of like take that with a huge pinch of salt. But then we start talking about personalities, and you start talking about personality traits, and some people are very introverted, some people are very extroverted. There's reasonably good, scientific data to support those as ideas that people sit on this spectrum between introversion and extroversion. And the thing is, I've worked with people at both ends of that spectrum. Some people, that really don't like socializing but are forced to do it, very uncomfortable with other people, will drink to make it easier. And some people who are very, very outgoing end up drinking because they're very outgoing and they're always in situations where everybody's drinking. So, there's I think that's one of the real dangers. It's like, what do you want? Because alcohol will probably provide you with some of that, and
Mhm.
it then it lulls you into this sense of security. It's like, oh, it's wonderful. I am getting this thing for love, pleasure, or the removal of pain, particularly if it involves next to no effort. So that's not modern life, by the way. That is just humanity. That we have evolved to move towards pleasure, move away from pain with the minimum amount of effort. And alcohol seems to do that. And maybe it does it for a bit, quickly stops doing it, because what happens is if you get an up, you get the down.
Mhm.
So, all right, it makes you feel less anxious, less insecure, less nervous when you're drinking it. But the second you stop drinking it, like literally, once your blood alcohol stops going up, you start to get the opposite effect. And by the time you wake up in the morning, you're going to have less of the neurotransmitters that help you feel secure and safe and relaxed. You're going to have less of those floating around your brain, and you're going to wake up feeling even more vulnerable than you did before you started drinking the night before.
Yeah, I kind of fell into that a little while in my early, gosh, late teenage years. I got it pretty early, honestly. Um, I wasn't a bad kid, but I did fall into partying because it lowered my anxiety. I was riddled with anxiety my entire life. I was bullied really bad. I had a lot of childhood trauma, and it made me clam up, and I stopped talking for 15-ish or so years, maybe longer. No, it was about 15 years. But anyway, I stopped moving. I was stiff and my head was down, and I lost range of motion in my neck and shoulders because I was terrified that someone might see me because it wasn't safe for people to see me. And so the only time that I could relax, the only time that I could talk, the only time that I could just feel okay was when I drank. And I definitely had some problems with it from my late teen years into my early 20s, where I definitely took it overboard and did entirely too much drinking. And yeah, so like I get it. But I did come out of it. I didn't stay addicted or anything. I know how to.
No, it's good. It's good. But I think it's very interesting, the way you talk about feeling it very much in your neck. And I think that's one of the things that I come across a lot with people. Kind of like both ends. The people that I work with when they're interested in stopping drinking and turning their lives around, but also I spend a lot of time talking to very successful people who've stopped drinking, and I like to kind of try and understand what is it that keeps them sober. I say I try and understand it. I'm basically completely obsessed with it. So one of the things that comes up an awful lot are these very kind of physical therapeutic activities. Yoga being the classic example. I mean, you can't go for more than 10 minutes talking about sobriety and not have somebody mention yoga, but there's a lot of other things. Massage is very useful. Pranic breathing, any kind of breath work, that's enormously helpful to reconnect us with our bodies, because part of what we were doing when we were drinking was trying to disassociate ourselves from our bodies, because that was where we stored the pain and the trauma and those feelings. I mean, that's what they're called. They are feelings. You feel them in your body. So helping people to find a better way to process those feelings and to deal with them, means we often stray into very physical areas. And I'm a huge fan of dancing. I think that the world needs more dancing. That and inline skating, but I think that's probably a harder sell. So I just go dancing. We need more dancing.
I agree entirely. I teach yoga, and when I was in my early 20s is when I started. Actually, it was probably like I was probably like 18 or 19 when I started getting into yoga. So that absolutely helps, and I agree that dancing does too, and that's helped me in both things. But we have these trapped emotions in our body, and we don't correlate. It's a new concept. Not really, it's not a new concept, it's a very ancient concept, but it's just now getting into the mainstream, and the science is catching up with, so that we can understand that emotions are not just a part of our brains and our thoughts, because that's how we've kind of treated them until, like, well, now, but we're starting not to, but they are actually stuck in your body in the form of, the way I always break it down so that people understand it from a scientific point of view is, in a nutshell at best, but chemical or feelings, emotions are just chemicals in your body. And if you don't let those process out and you don't feel them and they don't do their job, they don't work through to be released and detoxed from your body, they will just sit around somewhere in your body waiting for the chance to be processed and felt and released. And that causes tension and muscle tightness and inability to move and even sickness,
Uh, I,
addiction.
I'm gonna I'm going to call him out. It was Aristotle's fault. He was the one. He said that, the brain and the body aren't really linked, and, it's all about the mind and all of that kind of stuff. So we'll blame him. But, I think you're right. It is good to see that the rest of the world is catching up, that there is, uh, you know, there's this link between how you feel and how you think, and it's great. I mean, it's coming from a lot of different research. So the whole idea about gut health and how that impacts on your thinking, that's enormously interesting. Yeah, certainly. the work that I do, that kind of idea of being able to work your way through those emotions very physically. I know, as I said, I work a lot with men, so sometimes we talk more about sport, but seriously, a good game of football, actually it's got a lot to it, hasn't it? Because it's got community, which is incredibly important. It's got the kind of the physical exercise component, which keeps you healthy, which is enormously important. But actually, it has an emotional concept, an emotional part to it, much as most men wouldn't like to admit that that's a part of it. It actually it can really help you to work your way through the stresses and strains of life.
Yeah, because once you heal that thing that came up, you learn a lesson from it, and you can take that you take that lesson with the coping skills that you just learned through processing it, and then you get to apply that to the new things coming into your life, because we're always going to be met with new problems and new emotional turmoil and new traumas and new things. The only constant in life is change. And if you don't process what you already have, man, your toxicity bucket is going to get full and start overflowing. And then you're going to end up with all sorts of diseases and sicknesses on top of everything else that you have going on. But if you can process that stuff, it's all about it's just healthy healing stuff.
And I think it's like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland said, you got to run fast to stand still in my kingdom. And I think that's the problem. Most people, they think, oh well, I'm all right now. I can just kind of sit back and relax. And it's like, well, okay, but if you sit back and relax, you will be going backwards. Unless you are actively moving forward, you will go backwards. And that's the stark choice that I see a lot of people that I work with. They're effectively looking at it, and it's like, well, so if you want to stop drinking, honestly, it's fairly easy. Go about it in the right way. You can stop drinking for a month without too much hardship. But if you're not prepared to do the rest of the work to keep moving forward, then eventually you will slide back and you will start drinking again. And, you'll be basically back where you were before you stopped, but probably a little bit worse.
So, what's your story? How'd you end up here?
So I mean, I kind of struggle with this because I definitely wouldn't have what people would call a classically difficult childhood. I was very lucky. My parents are still together. I was raised in a home I didn't really want. Well, I did want for stuff. I wanted all of the rubbish plastic things that I didn't need. But, all of my basic needs in terms of love and fulfillment and food and all of that sort of stuff, that was all taken care of. So, in one respect, I had a very good childhood, but I kind of struggled at school. It was not really the sort of place that was designed for me because they had one set of expectations about how I should behave, and I had a slightly different set of expectations about how things should be. And it wasn't just that, I wouldn't do what they told me to. I argue with the fact that what they were telling me to do was basically quite stupid and a waste of all of our time. So why are we doing it? Which, didn't end well, did it? So I think when I was growing up, I didn't have that much. I didn't have that many ways of validating myself, of saying, like what I've got to offer the world. It didn't seem to be very valuable. It certainly wasn't valued in the schools, and that led to, some anxiety and some issues socializing, and I I got to my teens and I got to my teens, and then alcohol came along, and I thought all my Christmases had come at once. It seemed to just, fill all of the holes, and it just made me confident, and it made me funny. I think it even made me better looking, maybe. So it seemed to be doing so much for me. So I went all in with it. I loved it from the start, and I went on. I went to college. I did quite a bit of drinking there, as most people do, and sort of as I left college, I guess I started this process whereby the amount of people that I drank with slowly went down and down and down and down. So it became less and less social, but the amount I drank went up and up and up and up. So it was more drinking, but with less people. And I took it to its logical conclusions. I ended up sat in my flat pretty much on my own, drinking a couple of bottles of wine every night, which, it wasn't any fun. And if you'd looked at me at the time, you would have said that I was doing quite well. I was outwardly pretty successful. If you'd asked, I would have told you that everything was amazing because I took a good game. Um, and it seemed like it was all going very, very well, but I was honestly pretty miserable at the time. And my wife and I, we sort of decided that it was about time to start a family, and that's supposed to be quite good fun, isn't it? And yeah, we sort of threw ourselves into that. And yeah, it did. It seemed like a bit of a new dawn, and it seemed like I stopped smoking around that point, and it seemed like things were getting better, and we were quite optimistic. And then my wife had a miscarriage, and it all got very, very difficult. I mean, obviously, it was very hard on her, but I think the worst thing was that I really wasn't there for her. My coping mechanism was to disappear off into a glass of wine. So I did that, and I just pretty much left her on her own, which is absolutely the worst thing you can do. And kind of came to a head, and I never stood in front of the mirror at 4 a.m. and actually asked myself this question in a kind of dramatic and moodily lit way, which make a great autobiography. But I now realize that I spent a couple of months kind of framing in my mind, what did I want from life? Who was I going to be? What did I want more? Did I want a drink or did I want and the good news is that I picked the right one. And funnily enough, almost exactly 9 months after I'd stopped drinking, our daughter was born, and I haven't looked back.
Well, that's beautiful. It hardships like that really do hit you. I have routinely thought about how much harder it must be for other individuals because I smoked cigarettes for from the time I was about 16, 17 until I was 23. I quit everything cold turkey the moment I found out I was pregnant. Drinking, cigarettes, everything. And we also lost our first at 15 weeks. And of course, on the way to the hospital was like, somebody give me a cigarette. And that's when that started back. And as soon as we got home from the hospital, about 3 or 4 days later, was probably I may have had alcohol poisoning because that also, yeah, it throws you right back into it. But we became pregnant with our son, who is fine and here and now and everything. About 6 months later, and again, I quit everything cold turkey and have not looked back since. And I just routinely think about how I had the luck, blessing, I don't really know the word, to have I have another life to take seriously. So that gives me the extra oomph I need to really quit it all and let go of it and never look back. But some people don't have that luxury. And well, I mean, I don't know if it's a luxury, but like that milestone that you can attach the quitting to rather than it's just a regular Tuesday. And now I have to make a decision. Well, I don't have to make a decision. That's the thing. I had to make a decision because I was in that position. But just your regular person on a regular Tuesday who there is no grand interventions coming in, that's a little bit harder, I suppose.
Yeah. So the thing is, if you really talk to people, they all find a way. There is always something, and that a lot of it does stem from family. I meet an awful lot of people who either they're at the point of starting a family, or they've got young kids and they're starting to worry that the kids are realizing it, or sometimes their kids are a bit older, and one guy whose daughter recorded him on her phone when he was drunk, and then played it back to him the next morning, and he was like, "It's time to stop drinking, don't you?" So the whole having kids often is the spur. But I worked with a guy not that long ago, and one of the most one of the things that really changed for him, one of the most profound things, he'd kind of come into it a little bit reluctantly. He sort of knew he needed to do something, but he wasn't really convinced. He was still a little bit like, well, I enjoy it. And then we were working through some things, and he told me this story about when he was drinking, with a family do, and he just went quiet, and I was like, "Oh, what's the matter?" He's like, "Do you know what? I've just realised that I scared the living daylights out of one of my nephews by just getting very drunk at this family do," and that was the thing that really clicked for him. So, it can be about children, but they don't even have to be your own. Most people they've got something that's going to click with them, and actually what most people need is the space, the opportunity to kind of think it through, and to find those moments, and to have those realizations, and to come to the conclusion that even if they got some vague amount of joy from going to that party and getting absolutely trashed, the damage it has done is far outweighs that tiny piece of joy.
Yeah, you really have to just sit back and look at your priorities. Because again,
Yeah,
we only have X amount of time. We never really realize how much time we don't have.
yeah. And I think that's one of the problems that we have as a society. We don't create that space. We don't create that time. We don't give ourselves that opportunity to reflect on things, because yeah, if you've got 30 seconds queuing in a line, I mean, blimey, you wouldn't want to be bored, would you? You better pull out your phone and play Candy Crush or something. And it's just like everything is no longer enough just to do the washing up. You've got to be, learning Tai Chi on YouTube at the same time or something, haven't you? And like most of the most profound thoughts I've ever had in my life have come within those moments of silence, when I have been doing something that has occupied a part of my brain, but not all of it. And I have definitely not been thinking about the thing that I have this huge realization about. I've just been, washing the dishes and staring into space. And I think that's something that we really need to recapture as a society. And if you don't want to do that, well, at least invest some time in a therapist, a counselor, a coach, somebody who will give you that space to actually think through your problems, because you've got all of the answers. You
Mhm.
just need that space, and at an absolute push, you might just be lucky enough to have a friend who can do that for you. And if you have, take them out for a cup of coffee and buy the coffee, and just be incredibly nice to that person, because they are the best friend that you will ever have. Sadly, I think that is the problem with men. It's not that we don't talk. It's not that we don't want to talk. It's that we don't listen. It's that we just fill the dead air with inane chatter about football or music or beer or something. And actually, we just need to give our friends the space to work through their problems. That's the greatest gift we can give our friends, I think.
Absolutely. Most problems will go away if we have somebody in our corner who is listening and validating and, yeah, helping us with the space to work through it, because we do have all the answers in our heads already. Everything is within us. It's just whole
Yeah,
support.
and I think part of the problem is, most people, we want to help, and we misinterpret what helping means. And for many years, I would struggle with talking to my wife, because my wife would describe a problem, and I would go, great, let's put up some shelves. And the thing is, like, half the time when she's describing this problem, she doesn't want shelves, she wants a hug. And the other half of the time, she doesn't want me to just rush to the solution. She actually just wants to spend a bit more time defining the problem.
Mhm.
Because, like, maybe we do need shelves. Maybe we need to get rid of some books. Duncan does own quite a lot of books. But it's like, even if shelves were the right answer, she wants to go through the process of thinking and coming to the decision that shelves are the answer. And I think, you know, it comes from a good place, because we want to help, don't we? And we think of doing things as helping, whereas actually, so much of the time, helping people to formulate the problem accurately in their mind is the greatest help that you can give most people.
Yes, that is beautifully put, and I agree completely. Again, it's like with the dieting thing, like the problem is that we don't feel comfortable in our bodies because we would like to lose like 15 pounds. Okay, great. So the solution is automatically eat better. Okay, great. Let me just get on that. But yeah, we need to dissect it, unpack it, figure out why we're making the decisions that we're making and how we can make better decisions and all of that. And I always come back to dieting because that's just an easy to understand analogy. This goes across the board with all of the things, like with drinking. The problem is I'm drinking too much, and okay, well, the solution is to quit. Well,
Yeah,
great. But there's a whole lot in between that.
absolutely. And look, trust me, I've met enough people to know that there is a danger in just quit. Because if you just quit, half the time you end up transferring what you were doing with alcohol onto something else. And I know this because I did it myself. I stopped drinking, and this little evil voice in my head said, "Well, now you're not drinking, you can eat pretty much whatever you like, can't you?" And before that, I never used to eat stuff. I'm not really that into the sweet foods and that kind of thing. But I stopped drinking, so I had a free pass. So I ate a lot of ice cream and I ate a lot of cookies. And I got to a point where I realized I was just eating the way I was drinking, and it's because what sat beneath the drinking was not being addressed. And the thing is, if you try and address it whilst you're drinking, you're probably going to fail most of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time, you need to address the drinking so that you can start to develop the self awareness. You can start to reattach your prefrontal cortex so you can do some executive function thinking. You know, so that's why you need to stop drinking before you do the therapeutic work. That's not universally true. I don't do know quite a few people who have done the therapeutic work and then they've just no longer really wanted to drink, and it's just kind of fallen by the wayside in a beautifully almost accidental kind of a way. But in general, my advice would be stop drinking. It makes doing the therapeutic work easier. But if you stop drinking and don't do the therapeutic work, you will either end up doom scrolling Facebook, going to the gym every day, and just pumping iron until you go crazy, or you'll probably get 3 or 4 promotions at work. You'll be working that hard. And there's the irony, isn't it? You know, there's so many people in the business world who have this bunch of unprocessed trauma, and their way of kind of like dealing with it is just working and focusing and working. And we laud them. We tell them that they are the greatest thing ever. Yet you take that same pain and you channel it into alcohol or heroin or cocaine, and we call you a loser.
I agree completely. I've done a lot of episodes on how we run, how entrepreneurs and the business world run themselves into the ground trying to prove that they're enough. I did it myself for a lot of years, which I have all of this to show for. That's great. But luckily, I have learned how to incorporate the yin just as much as the yang, because that's where that is. Everything is so a lot these days. You know, it's excessive drinking, excessive food, excessive material goods, excessive consumerism, excessive working, excessive all the things. And because that's what we glorify and that's what we tell everybody that that's where they need to put their attention. Whereas to keep balance, you have to find the space, the yin, the downtime, the working through my children. To get them to clean their rooms. I tell them about how we have to upkeep what we have, because upkeeping what we have shows gratitude for it. It keeps everything in working condition. It, I don't know how you feel about the law of attraction and whatnot, but I tell them that the universe doesn't give us more if we can't handle taking care of what we already have. And that translates directly to your body as well. You know, working through your emotions, your belief systems, your traumas, and healing all of that is the upkeep part. This just as much as the sleep and the rest and the exercise and the good diet is.
Yeah, so I was watching something. recently on Amazon Prime. A great series called Repurposed by a guy called Chris Dreisbach, who's a bit of a sober legend. And he interviewed a guy called Spike, and I can't remember his surname, but he was the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. So he came third in the 2020 presidential elections, which is kind of roundly nowhere in your country, isn't it? But he's like a prominent public figure, but he'd he'd got a diagnosis and he'd become quite ill, but he figured out that he could actually, do a lot to to mitigate the symptoms. He couldn't cure it, but he could manage it by doing all of the stuff that we know we should be doing more of: exercise, yoga, meditation, good diet. And he sort of referred to it as like it's like basically it's kind of like a part-time job for me. Like literally every day I have to do this stuff to make myself feel well. And it's like it's not like I just have a cheat day every now and again. I never have cheat days. My diet is always at spot on because I know if it isn't, then I'm not going to feel good, and I'm not going to have the energy to do the kind of good work that he wants to do in the world, and he is doing and a lot of amazing stuff. And I sort of thought, well, you know what? That's probably the attitude that most people should have. Most people have something in their life that means that they've got to do a bit more work around it, whether that's a mental health issue, whether that's a physical health issue, whether that is, a neurodiversity piece. You're just born that way, And so I was fortunate to be diagnosed as dyslexic when I was quite young. And that helped me enormously because it made a lot of sense of a lot of stuff that didn't seem to make sense. But it also taught me that I had to work harder, that if I wanted to write anything that was going to be anywhere near English, I was just going to have to work a bit harder at it. So I do. And, I've written a few books. So I think probably if somebody who wasn't dyslexic had tried to write the same books, it would have taken them maybe 25% less time. That's I can't argue and moan about that. I've just got to put in the hours, haven't I? So we've all got something that we need to work on. And maybe we should all start to consider that as a part-time job. Part of my job is dealing with my depression. Part of my job is dealing with, whatever doubt, I don't know, whatever medical condition you've got, diabetes. Part of my job is dealing with my diabetes. I think the world would be in a lot better place if we all took that attitude.
Yeah, it's a discipline rather than waiting for the motivation.
Yeah, it's not fair. It's not fair. It would be fair if everything was nice and easy and all of that kind of stuff. And it's not your fault. It's absolutely not your fault, and it's absolutely not fair, but it is your problem. So,
Nope, matter of facts of life. It is what it is.
absolutely.
Well, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this hour. It's went by really fast and I think it went really smoothly. Tell everybody how they can find you and about your books, plug in whatever you like.
Yeah, so my most recent book is called Real Men Quit, which I wrote because there's a lot of amazing women doing a lot of amazing work in the sober space, and I've got an enormous amount of respect for them, but they don't talk about sport enough. So I wrote a book to try and kind of combat that. So if you like sport or James Bond, Star Wars, The Terminator, those kind of things, then you're going to love this book, particularly if you're a fan of not very good jokes. There are a lot of really, really badly blokey jokes in there. Or if you happen to know a man who drinks too much, you can stop laughing now because, of course, generally we're pretty good at drinking excessively. In fact, the World Health Organization said recently, for every 4 drinks sold, 3 of them are drunk by men. So, yeah, you probably do know a man. That's called Real Men Quit. You can find it on Amazon. It's dead easy. Just put Real Men Quit into Amazon, it will come up. But before that, I wrote a book called Get Over Indulgence. And if your listeners would like to grab a copy of that, they can grab a free copy at getover.uk. That's over.uk. You put that into Google, it comes up with a bit of my website. You can have a PDF version or a Kindle, or if you can stand to listen to me for 2 hours and 45 minutes, then you can listen to the audiobook as well. That's at getover.uk. That takes you to a bit of my website, so you can find all of the socials on there as well. We do quite a bit on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, doing a bit on YouTube as well. So yeah, if anybody wants to chat, I'm always happy to help out. If there's anything I can do, please do let me know.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that they get the links and they're all easy to find and all that. Um, One last thing, I love your lava lamp. I had a bit of a lava lamp obsession when I was a kid, and I had probably 15. And we would go to, my mom loved yard sales, and we'd go to yard sales, and I'd pick up another lava lamp. She'd be like, "Seriously, Savannah, do you really need another one?" "Yes, I do. I don't have a purple one." And
Yeah.
also, I love that it's in the shape of a rocket. I'm actually stationed right outside of Huntsville, Alabama, which is what they call Rocket City. So all of
Oh,
the,
yeah, I got it deliberately for you.
oh,
So
I'm sure.
it's a Mathmos Talstar. It's the iconic rocket-shaped lava lamp. I had one when I was a kid. Well, I was at university, and I really, really loved it, and it went kind of very well with the sitting around darkened rooms in illegal states of mind, as I used to do quite a bit more when I was a kid. And I bought this one to sort of say, I'm still fun, I'm still rock and roll, I'm still enjoying myself, just do it slightly differently these days.
Yeah, you've matured
Well, possibly.
in the ways that you need to. It's fine. We should all
Yeah,
be
I've certainly developed emotionally speaking. I'm still am a bit of a 5-year-old boy at heart, but
as we all are still children on the inside, whether that be hurt children or healed children. And that just, we could do a whole nother episode on that, but I'll try to
yeah,
cut us off here.
absolutely.
Yeah, lava lamps were my first meditation device. I would sit there and just stare at them for hours on end. So I'm glad to see that they're making a comeback. But this was great. And thank you so much for being here today. And if anybody needs to reach out to him or wants to talk to him, then there's lots of locations you can do that at.